They say that some truths are so dark, so heavy, that history tries to bury them. But every now and then, one forces its way back into the light. And tonight, you and I are going to walk into a forgotten corner of the 15th century, where terror was not a side effect of power, it was the very weapon that built it. A place where fear didn't follow war, fear led it. And at the center of it all stands a man the world remembers as a monster, but few truly understand, Vlad III of Wallachia. Vlad Teeps. Vlad the Impaler. But what if everything you think you know about him is only half the truth? What if his cruelty was not the madness of a bloodthirsty ruler, but the carefully sharpened blade of a master strategist? What if horror itself was his greatest invention? To understand him, you have to go back to the moment when his world first broke. Vlad was not raised in a castle surrounded by loyal servants and soft comforts. He grew up as a hostage, taken by the Ottoman Empire when he was still just a boy. Imagine that, your childhood traded as collateral, your brother taken with you, your fate dependent on the whims of a foreign court. Most children would be crushed by that. But Vlad, he watched. He listened. And he learned. The Ottoman court in the mid-1400s was a furnace of ambition, discipline, fear, and absolute authority. Punishments were public. Torture was theatrical. Executions were performed not only to kill, but to teach. The message was simple: resistance brings suffering, obedience brings survival. In that world, young Vlad realized something most rulers never truly understand: that fear is a currency, and the one who controls it controls everything. Year after year, he saw how empires were shaped not only by armies and gold, but by the silent pressure of terror pushing down on millions of people. He saw how human suffering, displayed with precision, could divide, weaken, and paralyze even the strongest of enemies. And somewhere in that cold foreign palace, the boy who should have grown into a prince instead grew into something else entirely. Someone who knew that if he ever regained his throne, he would need more than strength. He would need a weapon stronger than steel. When Vlad finally returned to Wallachia as an adult, he found a land boiling with betrayal. The boyars, the noble elite, were notorious for switching loyalties whenever the wind changed. They killed princes, replaced rulers, and played puppet master to anyone who dared call himself king. If Vlad wanted to survive, he couldn't fight them with traditional politics. He needed to break the cycle, shatter the old structures, and terrify the idea of rebellion right out of the minds of his enemies. And so he began. At first, the punishment seemed harsh but not unheard of. Executions of treacherous nobles. Public displays of justice. But then something shifted. Vlad started using a method he had seen in the Ottoman court, a method used sparingly by the empire, but remembered by everyone who witnessed it. A method so gruesome that even hardened soldiers looked away. Impalement. Most rulers would have used it occasionally. Vlad turned it into a language. A message carved into the landscape. A warning no one could ever misunderstand. Each body raised on a stake was a sentence, and the land of Wallachia became a book written in blood and wood. But here's the part history usually gets wrong. He wasn't killing at random. He wasn't blinded by rage. Every stake had a purpose. Every display was part of a larger strategy to prove one thing: that he could not be manipulated, bargained with, or betrayed. And slowly, the boyars who once bragged about controlling princes began whispering behind closed doors, terrified of even speaking his name. For the first time in generations, Wallachia was united under a ruler who actually held power. Not because people loved him, but because they feared him more than they feared each other. If you're enjoying this journey into lost history and hidden truths, take a moment to subscribe. There are so many more secrets like this waiting beneath the surface, and you don't want to miss what comes next. But Vlad's true test, his moment of terrifying brilliance, came not from internal threats, but from the greatest empire on earth, the Ottomans. And at their head stood a man whose name alone could silence a room. Sultan Mehmed II, the Conqueror of Constantinople. This was not a ruler who backed down. This was a man who commanded armies large enough to swallow entire kingdoms. And Vlad, ruler of a tiny, poor principality, decided to stand against him. It sounds suicidal, and by all logic, it should have been. But Vlad had no intention of defeating the Ottomans in a normal war. Instead, he prepared a different kind of battlefield, one where the enemy's courage, not their bodies, would be destroyed. As Mehmed's forces marched into Wallachia in 1462, they found nothing but smoke. Farms burned. Wells poisoned.
Village anti.
Bridges destroyed. Not a single place to rest, feed their horses, or take shelter. The land itself became an enemy. And then one night, Vlad struck. He didn't charge with an army. He didn't line up for battle. He slipped into the Ottoman camp with a small squad of elite warriors and unleashed one of the most chaotic psychological attacks in medieval history. Fires erupted. Tents collapsed. Horses screamed. Shadows of Wallachian soldiers darted in and out of view. The goal wasn't to kill tens of thousands. It was to make the Ottoman army feel hunted, vulnerable, unsure of every sound in the dark. Fear, once planted, grows fast. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared the Ottomans for what came next. As Mehmed pushed deeper into Wallachia, he approached the city of Targovist. The gates were open. The streets were silent. No defenders stood ready. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. And then, they saw it. A valley filled with stakes. Thousands upon thousands of them. Some tall as trees, others shorter, packed so tightly the ground looked like a forest made of sharpened wood. And on each stake, a body. Soldiers, prisoners, traitors, nobles, all arranged with eerie precision, stretching as far as the horizon. A monument of suffering, built not for death, but for the mind. This was the forest of the Impaled. Try to imagine it through the eyes of Mehmed's soldiers. Many of them had fought in brutal wars. They had seen death, seen blood, seen cruelty. But this was something else. This was not the aftermath of battle. This was art. A message crafted for them, waiting for them, whispering one truth. If you enter Wallachia, this is what awaits you. Chroniclers write that Mehmed himself, one of the most powerful rulers in the world, stared at the scene in shock. His army, strong enough to crush kingdoms, hesitated.
Morale cracked.
The psychological weight was too much. It was as if the entire landscape screamed that no number of soldiers, no amount of money, no divine approval could guarantee survival here. And in that moment, Vlad won. Not because he had the bigger army. Not because he possessed superior weapons or a stronger economy. He won because he understood fear. He had studied it, practiced it, mastered it. He knew how to wield it like a sword, how to carve victory not from the battlefield, but from the minds of his enemies. The Ottomans retreated. A miracle, some called it. A nightmare, others said. But history? History rarely speaks the truth aloud. And the truth is that Vlad accomplished something extraordinary. He used horror as a shield, terror as armor, and suffering as a weapon sharper than any blade forged by human hands. And yet, here is the strange part. Vlad died not as a hero, nor as a villain, but as a warning. A reminder that power, once built on fear, can never truly rest. His methods protected his land, but they also isolated him. Allies grew wary. Enemies multiplied. And in the end, the man who used terror to control others became trapped inside the world he created. But centuries later, his story still lingers, not because of Dracula, not because of legends or myths, but because he revealed a truth most people never want to acknowledge. that fear can reshape nations, collapse armies, and rewrite history. That psychological warfare existed long before anyone gave it a name. And that sometimes, the mind is the true battlefield. If you've stayed with me through this journey, consider subscribing for more forgotten histories and hidden truths. There are countless stories buried beneath the surface of our past, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. And as we close the chapter on Vlad the Impaler, remember this: history is not made only by those who wield swords, but by those who know how to control what people feel. Vlad knew that better than anyone. He understood that terror, when used with precision, could defeat even the greatest of empires. That is why his legacy endures. Not because he was a monster, but because he was effective. And effectiveness, when born from darkness, is the most terrifying power of all.